Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back, and I hope you're well. First off, no camera today, just really not feeling too good. Before this video begins, I'd just like to take a moment to say, check out my personal Discord server. It's gonna be down below in the description. We're always looking for new people to hang out with. But I'd really like to take a moment to shout out Alex and Hurbious for their help with this series. They've been extremely kind and easy to work with, and they've taught me so much. And just none of this would have been possible without them and their guidance. So huge thank you to you guys, as well as thank you to Jaish for fact-checking and providing a few extra things for this video. All you guys are great. Thank you to all of you guys. Additionally, shout out to Jaish and agentanti for providing us their extremely detailed Railgun setup document guide. It's down below in the description if you'd like to check it out. It's just helped us so much with fact-checking and just getting the series out as a whole. Check it out down below. All right, let's get into it. Alright, so the first thing I'd like to talk about is, are game passes actually needed for Endgame? And the short answer is no, not really, but you're encouraged to use some of them if you're missing some important items. VIP and Premium are pretty much useless for Endgame. Executive is probably one of the best ones, as it gives a bunch of extra base size and a high MPU 2-unit upgrader. Dark Knight is also pretty good, as it's a bit on the cheaper side, and there is a portable item in there as well. Fright Folly is also pretty good, as that's a very cheap game pass, and it does have a really good portable upgrader in it as well. However, it is a Halloween exclusive, so keep that in mind. And of course, Shiny Charm is just RNG. To be fair, a lot of people think that you will have like a very big spike in shinies, albeit this is still RNG. You could get the short end of the stick and still have bad RNG. There's really no guarantees with it, so just felt like I'd include that. But yeah, you really don't need any game passes to be good at endgame, but they will help. They do have advantages, and just something to consider. All right, I feel like this should be a fairly obvious one, but when making setups, definitely use dragon cannons, not railgun cannons. Both are actually very different in terms of velocity, arc, etc. What I'm trying to say is that because of just how different the ore is launched, you can't use turns on a dragon cannon and on a railgun cannon. They just don't work that way. If you're still early on in the game and you don't really have a chance to use dragon cannons just yet, I do encourage that you skip even trying to use turn setups with railgun cannons and wait until you have enough dragon cannons to make a dragon cannon setup. So just, if you don't have dragon cannons, just wait it out until you can get them and just use line setups. That's what we encouraged in the last video when we were talking about railgun turns and stuff. It's just railguns, use line setups, dragon cannons, use turn setups. Especially because railguns also don't have traditional line lengths, so if you're trying to do turns, you can't even have that apply. Alright, so something I want to cover really quick that I did cover in the last video, but I'd like to cover it again anyways, is base rotation. So if you see where I'm at right now, I'm currently at the corner of my base closest to the Doge Chan in the back. That would make this the Doge Chan corner. However, if you go over to this one over here that's closest to the hill, that would be opposite Chan corner. Now, the reason that you're supposed to use these two is it seems to be just the most consistent. And sometimes if you rotate your setup in a way where you're not using those, it might not work anyways at all. So if you're having problems with your setup and you notice you're not using one of those, consider just picking up your entire setup, rotating it and resaving it, and then trying it again. That should actually fix a lot of stuff. So just something to consider. Something I'd like to point out is that base number really does matter when it comes to rebirthing and setup consistency. For example, this is base 1, and the base next to me over here is base 2. These are good bases to be on. The reason is they're consistent, and we notice that setups seem to work very well at these bases. However, we notice that bases 3 through 6 are in a different quadrant of the map, and as a result, they really don't work as well. And your setup might not even work at all. It's pretty weird, but if you're not on bases 1 or 2, consider joining a different server. As well, solo islands do work completely fine, and I just figured I'd mention that you can use solo islands as much as you'd like. And if you're unsure how base numbers and base order works, it's determined by the order of the base you spawn in on. So if you play in an empty server, you'll always be on base 1. If someone joins, then they'd be on base 2. If someone else joins, they'd be on base 3, and so on and so forth. So something to consider. Definitely don't play in like public servers and stuff. Try to play in VIPs. It will very, very much help, especially if you can be on bases 1 and 2. Otherwise, just consider going to a solo island. You'll definitely have the best experience there. All right, next I'd like to cover teleporter centering and how to do it. Teleporter centering is where you use an item kind of like how you would use a railgun turn, just an out of hitbox item, to forcefully center the angle of the ore. It helps a lot with getting the first turn to be very, very consistent, as you can kind of guarantee or at least increase the odds of the angle and like rotation of the ore mid-launch being the same, so that way you can get the same amount of consistency. That's the reason that first turns are so much easier to get than second turns, if you've noticed from the other guide video I've done. So how you do it is you could use something like Fireplace Wall or Pot of Gold, albeit keep in mind Pot of Gold is a permanently retired item, so do with that what you will. However, Fireplace Walls are actually available right now, so just keep that in mind. Basically, what you could do is you can take these walls and make sure that they're facing outwards, so kind of like how I'm doing it now, and you would just place one right here and the other right here. And then that's pretty much it. The results will speak for themselves, but it does help a lot with consistency for that first turn. And something to keep in mind is if you are using multiple hourglass and you're trying to get a little extra consistency, consider pushing them one unit forward like this. This does work, and it actually seems to help out quite a lot if you're using that, so just keep it in mind. Alright guys, next I'd like to just talk about what you're seeing right here. This is a pretty old trick. It's been around for a long time, and this is known as Havium inline. I'd like to bring this up because it's pretty much used in every setup at this point. But basically, Havium has a pretty perfect build in the sense that where the actual like drop part is on the mine, you can shove that directly into the launcher on Dragon Cannon. So that way when you load your setup, the ores just instantly get launched like this. So they pretty much just spawn and instantly hit the cannon and just go. This could actually save you a decent amount of time. In fact, even up to 1 or 2 second time save. So it's pretty good. It just allows the ore to spawn within the cannon rather than having to move through the teleporter, etc. The next thing I'd like to talk about is ore limit and why it's so important for endgame. If you notice, I do have only 10 ore limit, and the reason for this is actually a lot different than what you might think. The amount of explosions that could occur from Mad Monstrous Melter spam is just pretty aggressive to your FPS, and as FPS gets worse, other tricks and parts of the game just get worse too. So it's pretty much a consistency thing. However, Midas exploding with too many ores actually can cause Midas's explosion to push the ores after leaving the Dragon Cannon at the second turn. And this could change the trajectory of the ore when it leaves the Dragon Cannon. So it might not always hit your evals or something, and it can just skip a bunch of items in the line. So you're trying to prevent stuff like that from happening. It's pretty much just to minimize explosions and the problems that come from that. And speaking of explosions, we have to talk about shields, of course, and just how important they are right now. If you don't know what shields are in Miner's Haven, it essentially is like an extra life to an ore. If you use something like Turtle Dignifier to get a shield on an ore, if the ore technically dies to a blaster or something, it doesn't die and it just loses the shield. So it's just like an extra life, basically. To clarify, it also won't save the ore if the ore like hits the base or something. If the ore hits the base or goes through a quasar or something, it will die, but it's mostly for like explosions and like blasters and stuff. Something to keep in mind is that Havium actually drops ores with a default 3 free shields, which gives it just such a big advantage over other droppers right now in the endgame. It's just 3 shields is a lot. Additionally, Turtle is basically an essential for endgame at this point, as it gives a shield for every upgrade it does, and it's resettable. So you can get a shield every reset. It's insane. So if you're using 3 resets, you're getting, what, 3-4 shields? So it's, and then the 3 from Havium, it's just, right now with how many blasters you could use in a setup, it's really good to be using these 2 items. So something to keep in mind, shields are very broken. With this, you can kind of tell that other items like Midas Blaster and Mad Monstrous Melter are going to be just as important as the items that give those shields. Midas affects density and actually works in favor of dragon turns, allowing for more consistency. But Mad Monstrous Melter, or MMM, has a high multiplier to death ratio, and it's technically also a portable, as you could use it under your platforms. Like, as you could see here, I'm just going to load. Oh, that's a terrible load time. I think my internet's dying. Yeah, you could see them. They're just under. If you look, you could actually see the beam, and it is quite tall, so you do have some leniency here as well. But yeah, they're very good. You're going to get a big multiplier without risking your ore dying every time compared to something like Hydra, so keep that in mind. All right, I'd like to talk about the importance of portables for a minute. Portables are going to be probably your best friend in endgame, because if you think about it, right now endgame is centered around MPU, multiplier per unit. So being able to get multiplier while not having to use an item with a conveyor or something and take up more space in the setup allows you to shorten your setup. So the more portables you have, the shorter your setup can be and still get just enough money to get 20 skips. As of right now, the main like permanent game items that are used as portables would be Angel's Blessing, Methuselah's Mask, Statue of Knowledge, the Heart of the Void, and the Darkest Upgrader. You can get these at any point. They're always available, and I just feel like I should mention these first, because if, again, you're looking for portables, these are always available. As for event portables, there is one for Valentine's, which is Cupid's Arrow, which is an exotic. As for the St. Patrick's event, there is Leprotron, Clover Refiner, as well as a third being the Golden Clover Blaster. However, unfortunately, this item was just recently permanently retired as well. As for Easter, there's actually a lot in Easter, given there's just so many Easter items to begin with. But there are a total of 6 for Easter, being Energy Core, Portable Pearl Enhancer, Cybeg 9000, Final Fabergé, Big Bunny, and Demechanism. As for Halloween, this is actually a pretty good one too, but you have Phantom of Christmas Future, The Boy, Spider Queen, and Fright Folly, albeit that is a Game Pass item. And lastly, as for Christmas, you have Walrus Blaster, Ghost of Christmas Past, Spectre of Christmas Present, and there is technically a 4th for Christmas being the Ornament Blaster, but we haven't seen the Advent calendar in a pretty long time, so might not see this one for a while. And of course, speaking of events, I'd really like to use this as a chance to just say, please play events. I know that sometimes burnout in a game can happen, and you're like, maybe I won't play this one. Events are pretty good times to be playing the game. There's so many good items in rotation. Not only that, though, but there's so many items that just might not come back one day. For example, we recently just seen Santa's Chimney and Gingerbread House return for the very first time since Exotic Day. So just keep that in mind. Like, there's really no guarantee what might happen to an item. For just, if you really, really care, just try to get everything. Especially your portables and your upgraders, guys. Especially your portables and your upgraders. All right, This is going to be a little bit more complicated, but I'm going to do my best to explain it, so bear with me. But I'm going to talk about load order, and then I'm going to talk about setup splitting. But load order is basically manipulating the way that layouts save items by picking up everything except what you want to be the first loaded items. In a typical setup, the first items you usually load are Havium and a 19-unit distance mid-plat platform. You're essentially manipulating the save system to place those things down first, as layouts keep track of the order you place things in. What I'm trying to say is that if I was to build a setup, and I placed Freon Sprayer, Spooky Coal Mine, Ancient Conveyor, and Pineapple Refiner in this order, placing those down one after another in that order, and saved it, it would load them in that order. But then if I picked up all 3 of these, it now registers Pineapple Refiner as the first placed item, as these were just picked up and placed back down. So if I resaved my setup, it would load Pineapple Refiner first, but then if I was to pick up these 3 and place them back down and do the whole thing, Freon would be the first to be placed. You should do this to prioritize Havium in a setup, as well as a 19 length mid-plat, as Havium loading first will allow the ores to drop faster to save some time, but you also do mid-plat because not doing that can just cause some inconsistencies and even cause some ores to die. Before I go on to the next topic, if you are using the Reaper's Fortress and Greedy Latte trick in your setup, it is a little harder to get this to be consistent, as it is an FPS reliant trick, but you are encouraged to load these items in right after Havium. It just helps a lot with consistency, and you could use load order and how to do load order in order to make this possible. So, all right, the last big thing I'd like to cover would be setup splitting. It's pretty much where you can divide one setup into multiple layouts. So that way you can load your mine and the early part of your setup in, so that way the ore can enter the setup while the rest of the setup loads. So you essentially don't have to wait for the entire setup to load and then wait for the ore to drop anymore. You could load part of the setup, get the ore to drop, and then load the rest of the setup while it goes into the setup. As you can tell, that does give a pretty good time save. In a 2-split setup, like what I use in the sense of using just 2 layouts for your setup, the first layout should kind of look like this, your mine all the way until the first turn, and then the second layout should look something like this, pretty much just being the rest of the setup and all the other items included, like your hourglass, your dreamer's items, etc. Additionally, if you are using cornucopia, or you do have bad ping usually, in your first layout, you can consider putting either your evals, not the full eval line, and or your second turn, not the second line, just the turn or just the evals. You can consider putting those into the first layout. It does actually help quite a bit, and I know a lot of endgame players who do this, so keep that in mind. As well as there is also triple split, where you use all 3 layouts for this, albeit this is a little extreme. It is a thing, and it is used. And it's quite new. Essentially, it's as simple as you'd think. You give each line for the 3 lines its own layout. So like layout 1 would be line 1, layout 2 would be line 2, layout 3 would be line 3 and your other items, etc. It is good, albeit I think it is personally a bit overkill, but that's for you to decide. The last topic I have it all in this video is not necessarily a big thing, but it's something I'd just like to mention, is that there is going to be a document hub in the description. It's pretty much a document with links to other resources in Miners Haven documents to just have a constant hub or list of resources you could go to for things about the game. So whether it's like an MPU sheet, a shiny like odds sheet, or something like that, I'll link that below, just so that way if you're looking to do more extensive research yourself, that will be there for you as well. Well, I think that's going to be it for this one, guys. I don't really think there's anything else to cover for this one. I just kind of wanted to go over the essentials of what make Endgame Endgame and all the like crazy tech that we do as a community. It's all really interesting stuff, and I'm really just excited to know that I know all this now. It's pretty cool stuff, like knowing why we use low or limit, knowing why we use certain portables, knowing why we do load order. It's just all very interesting to me, and I'm so glad I got to share it with you guys. Again, thank you to everyone helping with this series. It's been a really cool opportunity to do this, as I'm not usually someone to appeal to the endgame community. So yeah, it's been really fun. That's probably going to be it for this one. Thank you all so much for watching. Happy New Year's, happy holidays, and I will see you around. Peace.